Hello, and today we are talking about concept 3b, which is mainly distance between 2 points. We're going to talk about how to find distance two different ways, both using Pythagorean theorem and using the distance formula. But first, a quick recap. The segment PC has endpoints at 6, 4. I'm going to label all this. And 16, 8. Okay, find the coordinates of midpoint M, which is of PC. Okay, last time to find the midpoint, we discussed that you take the average of the x values, so you add them up, 6 plus 16, that would be these two, and you divide by 2. And then you add the y values up. So 4 plus 8, and then you divide by 2. That would get me 6 plus 16 is 22, so 11. And 4 plus 8 is 12, divide by 2, which is 6. So right here I've got 11 comma 6. My midpoint M is 11, 6, and that's my final answer. So that's your recap from last time. Okay. Our intro for today. Prove that M is the midpoint of PC by finding the length of PM and of MC. Okay, first a flashback to what you maybe learned in middle school. We don't really know this year, so we missed some stuff. Pythagorean theorem. You can use this for a right triangle. Pythagorean theorem says that a squared plus b squared equals c squared, and it works on any right triangle. Right triangles have a 90-degree angle. When we're talking about Pythagorean theorem, C is always the side across from the right angle, and A and B are your legs. So C is what we call the hypotenuse. This is for right triangles only. So that's what we're going to use to prove over here. We're going to use Pythagorean theorem because you're given a grid. So we're going to make some right triangles. We're finding the distance of PM, which is my hypotenuse. So this is C. We are using a squared plus b squared equals c squared. And now to find the lengths of my sides for A and B, I'm just going to literally count, since each square is worth 1. So this side is 2, and this side is 1, 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay? Those are my A and B, so I plug those in. 5 squared plus 2 squared equals c squared. 5 squared is 25, 5 times 5. 2 squared is 4, because it's 2 times 2, and that's equal to c squared. If I add those up and combine like terms, I get 29 equals c squared. And to undo a squared, I take the square root. So c is approximately 5.39 if you go ahead and round it, but you could also leave it as a square root since it can't be simplified. Okay, next one, we're going to do the same thing for MC. So make a right triangle. This right here is MC. So this is what we are solving for. And we'll do the same thing. We use Pythagorean theorem. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. Count the sides. 1, 2. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Plug the same numbers in. Spoiler, this solves the exact same way. You're still going to get 5.39 approximately. And so the question was, prove that M is the midpoint of PC by finding the length of both PM and MC. Is M the midpoint then? Yes, because we know that these two segments are the same length, and that means that M is in the middle. So if you're given a grid like this, and I'm asking you to find segments, I want you to go ahead and use Pythagorean theorem, because that would be the easiest way to do it, because you can just count the sides, plug it in, and solve. You could go ahead and give me an answer rounded, but I do usually prefer you to leave it in a root and simplify the root if you can. Let's actually get down the distance formula now. So given these endpoints x1, y1, and x2, y2 of a segment on the coordinate plane, the length of the segment or the distance between the endpoints can be found using the formula. Okay, before I tell you, we just did Pythagorean theorem. And distance formula is basically the same thing. So I'm going to write down the distance formula right now. It's going to look scary, but I'll make it make sense in a second. x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. Okay. All this says is subtract the x values, square them, subtract the y values, square them, and then take the square root. This comes from Pythagorean theorem. So if you take Pythagorean theorem and you take the square root on both sides, it's going to look really similar, and let me prove it to you. So if I square root over here, I get a squared plus b squared. That gets rid of the little square root, so now it looks like this. That's the same thing as distance formula. So this is how you'll see me write it a lot of the time. Instead of writing this subtraction, I will write the change in x squared plus the change in y squared. And then you take the square root of that. Because it's the same thing as subtracting. Change in x is this little triangle, and change in y is this little triangle. That's the same thing as Pythagorean theorem, just compare them a second. These are your two sides, change in x and change in y, and then you take the square root. It's the same process, it's just one time you have a grid and the other time you don't. So your distance formula is at the top of this page as well. We're gonna side by side show how to do distance formula and Pythagorean theorem. They are essentially the same. It's just that when you are given a grid, you should use Pythagorean theorem. So we will actually do the right side first. Make your right triangle going straight down and straight over, and count your sides. 1, 2, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm going to use Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. The side that's across from the right angle is c. That's what you're solving for, because I want to know what's the length of this segment. Okay, my sides for a and b are 6 and 2. 6 squared is 6 times 6, so 36. 2 squared is 4. If I add those up, I get 40. And then I take the square root of both sides. Okay, you might remember from Algebra 1, perhaps not, this splits up into the square root of 4 times the square root of 10. So to write this as a simplified square root, which is a better option, square root of 4 is 2, so c is exactly 2 root 10. Okay, so this is a correct answer. I won't get mad at you if you go ahead and type square root of 40 in into your calculator and tell me that it's approximately 6.32. That's also okay, it's just that this answer is better. I'll take either. Okay, so now we'll use the distance formula. So this one we used Pythagorean theorem because we had a grid. This one, no grid, and so we use the distance formula. which is up here. Our 2 points, again, are -2, 1, and 4, 3. You're in geometry, so you should draw a picture. All right, now I'm going to find the distance between them. We just want to find, first, our change in x. So how are my x's changing? You can do the subtraction, it's just that I have most students do that wrong. So the distance between -2 and 4. On a number line, you count the spaces in between. There are 6 spaces in between. So this is my change in x, is 6. And then from 1 to 3, my y values, there are 2 spaces. The distance is 2, and so I say my change in y is 2. You can get the same thing by subtracting. 3 minus 1 is 2. 4 minus -2 is 6. You get the same thing. Just be careful and put it in parentheses if you want to use the subtraction method. I just counted. Okay, now we plug it in. My change in x was 6. My change in y was 2. I add those together. 6 squared is 36. 2 squared is 4. So again, my distance is the square root of 40, which, holy cow, it's the same thing. So you could say that it is either 2 root 10 or approximately 6.32. Notice you get the exact same answer, but you had a grid on this one and you didn't over here, which is how you know whether to use Pythagorean theorem or distance formula. I would like you to try the independent practice one on your own. Let's go ahead and check it. Find the length of UW if the coordinates of U, 4, and the coordinates of W are 10, 6. Okay. Find the distance. You don't have a grid, so it would be a bad idea to use Pythagorean theorem. We're going to use distance formula then. You can subtract 10 minus 5, 6 minus 4. That's fine. I'm just going to find how are they changing. So for my x values, the distance between them is 5 to 10 is 5 spaces. For my y values, my distance is 2. And now I can use my formula, which says that I have the change in x squared plus a change in y squared. Plug it in. You're doing 5 squared plus 2 squared. So that would be 5 squared is 25. 2 squared is 4. Add those up. Distance is square root of 29. You can leave it like that because it can't be simplified. Or if you type it in your calculator, it's going to be approximately 5.39 for our distance.